Now, time to get expert player breakdown directly from Canada's sports leader. Game Points welcomes TSN.ca producer and writer Scott Cullen.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you tonight, Matthew?
I'm well. I would say, Scott, that this is a pretty busy time of the year for you.
Yeah. Week has been, I guess, 8 or 9 days now. That it's been pretty hectic. But look, we've been standing there waiting for about 4 months for it to get going. So I don't mind if it means a few weeks of heavy lifting until the season starts.
Twitter.com/TSN Scott Cullen if you want to follow him on Twitter. And, of course, go to TSN.ca, click on Fantasy, and it's all there at your fingertips. All right, Scott, we got a whole bunch of questions to get to here on the show. Prior to the break, I was telling the folks that I do have one Toronto Maple Leaf on my fantasy hockey team, which the draft was last night. And I'm actually trying to trade him. So I think the guy, I don't think the guy is listening right now, so I think I'm okay. Your thoughts on what to expect with James Reimer? I mean, is this a situation where we're just kind of waiting for some other goalie to be kind of traded for and flown in, and he'll be relegated or shipped out in return? Or can this guy actually stay here and make it a season?
Well, I think it's possible that he could stay the season. I kind of thought all along that it made sense for the Leafs to look at the Luongo deal, and obviously, if that happens, James Reimer's value goes in the tank because either he ends up as the backup or off. Maybe he's part of the package to Vancouver to get it done. But in either case, that's not great for his value. But if I wouldn't bank on any trades being made, and sometimes they fall apart just because asking prices. They can't come to an agreement. And if Reimer, stays here, and presumably this deal isn't going to be done before the season starts, if Reimer starts and starts playing well, you never know. You might get on a run and get back to being what he was when he first came up. I mean, I even at his best, I don't think Reimer is, like Reimer is at his best isn't Carey Price at his best, but you could get a solid starting goaltender out of him, and if he's, say, your third fantasy goaltender, you can probably be pretty happy with that. Anything beyond that right now, I wouldn't be too excited about him. But
I got Henrik and I got Brizgalov, so I'm
well, see, and that's exactly where you want Reimer, right? Is as the third guy with some upside. That and I had a fantasy draft last night too, where I had him kind of in my queue waiting, and I ended up taking kind of a handcuff guy for one of my starters instead, but. I kind of weighed it back and forth, thinking that, if I get Reimer there and as the third goalie, there's upside there that, maybe he ends up being a starter and actually a pretty decent starter because, guys tend to come out of nowhere. Mike Smith last year probably won a bunch of fantasy pools and no one would have drafted him at the start of the season. So, there's, goaltending is one of the unpredictable parts of fantasy hockey, or perhaps the most unpredictable part.
Mokan?
Scott, looking at the Edmonton Oilers, of course, the Taylor Hall and Jordan Eberle and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins were playing with OKC in the AHL here. Out of those three guys, who do you expect to have a big season? Of course, Eberle led the team in points last year. Do you think he'll repeat that this year?
This is funny. My Twitter feed today has been bombarded by Edmonton fans who don't like my spin on Jordan Eberle. And it's not that I don't like Jordan Eberle. I mean, I'm Canadian, so I love Jordan Eberle. The guy, based on World Juniors alone, we have to love Jordan Eberle, and that's fine. But the stat head in me looks at a guy who scored on 18.9% of his shots, and not to go crazy on numbers, but that's rare. Like, guys, if you do it, that's great. That's a career year kind of thing. But usually it comes back, and so my forecast for Eberle is that he's not going to score at the same rate that he did last year. Which, for a guy who's 22 years old, expecting that it's not just going to keep going up and up, the Edmonton fans are not happy with that idea. But at the same time, I think Eberle's, he's a really good player. I think Hall's a really good player. I think Nugent-Hopkins is a really good player. If I had to guess at which one's going to have the most points, I'd say Nugent-Hopkins because Nugent-Hopkins gets assists. That's kind of his mode. But if I was picking the guy who I think is the most valuable of the bunch, I think it might be Taylor Hall because. Provided he can stay healthy, he has a chance to be a real game-breaking goal scorer. So I like, if I'm picking of those three guys, I think I would prefer Hall.
Anybody mix up Nick and Justin Schultz in your pool?
No, in fact, that was the standard pool thing where you're sitting there with a guy waiting at the top of your queue, and you're like just 3 more picks to get to me, 2 more picks to get to me, and the guy who was picking in front of me when I had Justin Schultz sitting at the top of my queue, and I ended up having terrible defenses as a result of all this. But so I'm sitting there with Schultz in the top of my queue, and the guy in front of me goes through the 90 seconds of his pick, and all of a sudden the pick comes up, Justin Schultz. I had to wait for that the whole time, and that's the regret of everybody who's in a draft pool is that somebody takes the guy you wanted just before, and then I got flustered and didn't take a defenseman, and then my defense class ended up kind of going off the rails. But yeah, Justin Schultz is he's an interesting one because of how amazing his start was in Oklahoma City. I mean, just 48 points in 34 games for a defenseman is kind of crazy off the charts. I projected, I think 28 points or something this year for Schultz, and at the rate I projected him at, it was like the best for a rookie defenseman in 20 years.
Oh, there you go.
Something of that range. Like it doesn't sound like a crazy amount to score 28 points in 46 games, but like rookie defensemen don't usually come in and score a lot. So if he comes in and and scores at that rate, and there's reason to think he will, right? Just get on that power play with the Oilers, that they could really do some damage. And the next few years in Edmonton are going to be pretty exciting, I think.
We are chatting, of course, with Scott Cullen from TSN.ca. Elsewhere in the league, Scott, bit of buzz in Carolina about the Stahl brothers, obviously, but it doesn't look like they're going to play together. So then your attention kind of focuses on the line mates of whoever will play with each Stahl. And a couple of names I wanted to throw at you. Yuri Tolusti, rumored to be playing, or looks like he might be playing with Eric Stahl. And Chad LaRose, a guy who in some leagues has right wing and left wing ability, and is playing, of course, with Jordan Stahl potentially.
Yeah, the wingers in Carolina are a very interesting mix now because they're splitting the Stahls up. That's all kind of based on the Tuomo-Ruutu injury. I think they were comfortable going with the Stahls together if they had Ruutu to handle second line there with Skinner. And but then when Ruutu's injured kind of long term, they said, okay, we're going to keep Stahls as the top 2 centers, and that still a good opportunity for Jordan Stahl. But like you say, some of these wingers are going to get opportunities. And LaRose is, to me, I think LaRose is like a default guy who, if the other players don't work out, LaRose is a veteran who scored a little bit for them. He plays primarily a checking role, but he scored a little bit. But Tolusti is one of the guys I've kind of been touting as a breakthrough candidate. He had a decent year last year, particularly in the second half when he started to play a little bit more with Eric Stahl. So I think if he ends up playing the bulk of the season on the wing with Stahl and Alexander Stemen, say, on the first line, like that's a pretty good opportunity for a guy who hasn't scored a whole lot in his career to this point. So, I really like Tolusti as, kind of a late round pick with upside for you. But then even today they were rolling through some of their minor league guys, like Zach Boychuk got a chance on one of those lines, and Boychuk, who was a first rounder who really hasn't been able to crack the NHL lineup, but is their leading scorer down the AHL. There's an opportunity that maybe Boychuk could be a guy who ends up getting a chance to score now. I don't know how deep I'd want my league to be before I'm drafting Zach Boychuk, but he's more a guy, keep an eye on him and really whoever else is going to get those chances on the wings in Carolina because, as much as the Hurricanes haven't been great over the past few seasons, Eric Stahl is a lock for 70-plus points every year. So whoever's going to be playing with him is going to have a chance to produce.
TSN Scott Cullen on Twitter.com. Check out TSN.ca for all of your fantasy sports needs, including, obviously, to get you ready for this upcoming NHL season. Scott, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thanks a lot, guys.
There you go. Scott Cullen from TSN.ca.